Yeah, so I'm going to present some results from an EPA-funded project that's looking at valuing Ireland's marine ecosystem service benefits. So this was a desk-based study. The unit I head up in Galway, Semaru, I suppose if we're known for anything, we'd be known for ocean economy statistics that we produce, where we look at different industries in what we call the ocean economy, and we try and work out what they're worth in terms of turnover, GVA, employment. But I suppose that's a very, that's a surface level analysis of what the economic contribution to society is from the marine environment. There's a whole host of other services we get from the environment that we haven't really looked at. So that's what this project is about. Like I said, it's a desk-based study, and we're very much interested in seeing what data is out there, what can we use in the literature in terms of values, looking at and there's a lot of it out there, the GIS data available in terms of ecosystems, and seeing what, using a ecosystem classification system, in this case again CICES, as Mary was talking about, what values we can put on them. So I'm just going to talk through these items here. Just before I do that, maybe this is just like Kathy did this morning. This is a picture I sometimes use with my own students. It's if you know Galway, it's looking across from Nemo's Pier across to the docks. But it's just interesting. I asked the students, what they can tell me. What are the activities going on here in terms of the marine environment? And some of them are obvious. You got shipping there in the docks there, where they're loading up scrap metal, which is some would say is an eyesore. But anyway, you have marine commerce going on at the dock levels there. There's other activities though taking place that maybe students and other individuals won't think about. So you get aesthetic services from the marine environment. So this here is an apartment block just down at the end of the pier on the opposite side. But that the apartment there was going for 700,000, and one of part of the sales pitch was it's got 180 degree views of Galway Bay. You've got this, there's a pipe there, it's difficult to see, but waste assimilation services in this picture. Again, it's run off from the streets. There was a lot nastier stuff coming out of that pipe going back a couple of years, but again, it's still, helping in terms of flood alleviation as well on the streets now, waste assimilation. You've obviously got fishing being a key one. You've got fishing boats in the background there. And then you've got recreational services there. There's a little guy in the middle there. You can't see him kayaking away. And these are the ones we can see. You also have, out there, I was messing around out here a few years ago, and I came across the oysters are alive and healthy here outside the dock gates in Galway, which is great to see. I still wouldn't be brave enough to eat it now, but they're there. And that's not to mention the other ones there in terms of the carbon sequestration, the cultural, the heritage services associated with Galway Bay in terms of, it comes up in pictures and songs. So there's all these services that we generally don't think about. And just to go back there, we talk about shipping, marine commerce. They're elements within the ocean economy. We wouldn't consider them ecosystem services in their own right. Well, certain classification systems definitely wouldn't. The CICES, the UN CICES system, doesn't consider shipping an ecosystem service. It doesn't interact with the biotic marine elements, I think is the reasoning behind it, even though it is using it as a transport medium. But of course, shipping can have significant impacts on other marine ecosystem services. So we still, in terms of drivers, pressures, we're interested in it. And this, you're probably all familiar with this, what's called the Real Map of Ireland, a picture championed by the Marine Institute. But the red outline there shows the area of the marine that we have sovereign rights over it, an area 10 times the size of Ireland. So we have a substantial marine resource. And again, it's interesting to note how the interest and the focus of policy has really been developing around the whole marine economy space. Since going back, at European level, you're going back to the 2007-8 with the integrated maritime policy of the EU. From that, you had regional strategies. In our case, the one of interest to Ireland being the Atlantic strategy. You have directives in terms of Water Framework Directive, Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And what's been interesting is as these have been developed is the need for economic analysis has become much more explicit in these European directives in particular. The Marine Spatial Planning Directive, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, it says up front, the member states shall carry out cost-benefit analysis, shall carry out cost-effectiveness analysis. And to do that, we need to be able to say something about achieving good environmental status, as is the case with the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. We need to be able to say something about what are the benefits, what are the ecosystem services, what are the value on those benefits. And it's a lot trickier to do when you're talking about the marine space. I mean, I was laughing at Dieter talking about trying to explain to people trading off between maybe conservation of swallows versus iPads. So start talking about the abundance of phytoplankton and the stocks of nephrops and see what kind of reaction you get. So why value marine? Why value? And of course, I should say in the Irish case, we have, as of 2012, we have the first integrated marine plan for Ireland. And again, one of the gaps highlighted in that, the Harnessing Our Ocean Wealth strategy, one of the gaps highlighted in there is the need for the valuation of these other less, I suppose, tangible marine ecosystem services. So why value marine services? And I'll go through this quickly because some of this has been said already. Obviously, to support sustainable growth across marine industries and sea-based strategies, we need to consider all the costs and benefits. And looking at those costs and benefits is an aid in decision-making. It can help in terms of the protection of the marine environment. And just an example, you're talking about the costs and benefits of climate change, mitigation and adaptation. Again, we can talk about in terms of planning and decision-making, we can highlight the ecosystem services that we get from maybe saltwater marshes or kelp beds or seagrasses in terms of storm surge alleviation. And there's a value associated with that, but that again often isn't taken into consideration. So again, we can help in that regard. It's an aid in communicating importance of marine ecosystems. I think Gordon put it nicely when he said enriching the dialogue, when he mentioned is a nice way to put it. Legal claims and natural resource damage assessment. Again, the explosion in environmental valuation methods actually came about following the Exxon Valdez disaster off Alaska, and you had a blue ribbon panel was put together, and you had a number of Nobel economic laureates there, and they looked at could we use these valuation methods such as contingent valuation in terms of assessing damage costs when you had a disaster like that. It's becoming much more prevalent now in terms of environmental accounting, and it's interesting, listening to Dieter talking about incorporating these service values into national accounts, and there's a lot of questions that need to be answered around that, but it's something that's ongoing. Corporate social responsibility reports we heard about earlier. And also, again, setting a framework to establish market-based, I have to speed up here. Setting a framework to establish market-based instruments such as taxes and guiding, as I said already, national and international strategies. But a key problem here, particularly in the marine, is the fact that we don't always understand the functions and processes of these ecosystems. So before we ever get to valuation, we have an issue in terms of do we understand the ecosystem cascade from the processes and functions down to the services that are delivered down to the benefits and the value of those benefits. And I like this is a diagram from the literature, but it's you can't read it there, but it's called a simplified food web for the Northwest Atlantic. And that gives you some idea of what are the complications here. Look, I'm not going to talk about this. I'll go straight to some of the values, put our heads above the parapet here. These are some of the values. We use the CISIS framework, and we try to see what could we value based on information in the literature. So this is the provisioning marine ecosystem services, and we can talk about offshore capture fisheries worth approximately €472 million in Irish waters, and that's across all fleets that are fishing in those waters. Inshore capture fisheries, again, about 42 million. Aquaculture, 148 million again, in Irish waters. 3 million, or approximately 4 million in terms of algae and seaweed harvesting. We don't try and put a value on everything. We can't, but we can quantify, say, for example, water for non-drinking purposes here. This is where water has been used in power generation for cooling. And again, we know from EPA reports, how much is being used. We don't try and put a value on it, but we do take it into consideration. In terms of regulating services, we can say something about waste services using, again, shadow prices in the literature that relate to the cost avoided by not having to bring wastewater up to what I suppose, full reuse quality. And again, based on that, we can estimate waste services from the marine environment. Again, approximately we estimate 317 million. Coastal defence, again, based on figures coming from the UK, we can say something about if we had to, using the replacement cost approach, if we had to replace saltwater marshes, and that's all we focus on here, we can use values from the literature in terms of benefit transfer to say something about that. Similarly, climate regulation, we have values in terms of carbon sequestration. We know there's different values out there in terms of how much carbon is being sequestered on a per hectare basis for salt marshes, sand dunes, estuaries, and offshore waters. So again, the significant value associated with that. And finally, cultural marine ecosystem services. Again, the map here is just showing in terms of aesthetic services, house price values. We can use hedonic price models, and there's work of Ronan Lyons of Daft and Trinity. He's been developing hedonic price models where we can tease out the contribution to house prices from having a sea view or being within a certain distance of the coast. Other elements we're looking at there, recreational services, massive. Okay, we know from previous EPA and a previous EPA study, we know that the amount of the participation rates in different marine-related recreational activities. And again, in some cases we have primary evaluation studies here related to sea angling, sea kayaking, but there's also other values in the literature that we can use in a benefit transfer situation. And again, you're talking about 1.6 billion in terms of the value of recreation services. Again, these are estimates, but I'd be confident in saying that these are lower bound estimates, because in fact that estimate only looks at Irish residents. It doesn't take into account visitors. So huge amount of information there. I'll stop at that.